Hey everyone, Grant here for the Flame Learning channel. In part 1 of this mini-series, introducing 32-bit float support in Flame 2018, we looked at media management and how Batch can deal with 32-bit media using the 32-bit capable nodes. As a reminder, please check the Flame documentation for the list of 32-bit capable nodes currently available. In this video, we'll look at how Action now handles the 32-bit media, as well as maintaining a 32-bit float processing pipeline. If you want to follow along, please use the downloaded media from part 1 of this mini-series. Picking up from where we left off, let's look at how you can use 32-bit float media in Action. In Batch, go to the Batch node bin and drag out an Action node. Select the Action node and press Ctrl-N twice to create 2 new media inputs. Here you have a logo, which is 8-bit, and you should also have some UVs, which are 32-bit float. Connect the logo into the first media input, and the 32-bit UV pass into the second media input. Action will very happily work with media consisting of multiple bit depths. This is no different to previous versions of Flame. Now looking at the Action node, it does say 16-bit. You could leave it like this if you want to use the 32-bit media in a 16-bit environment. But you also have the option to push Action up to 32-bit in the 3D environment. We'll do this in the next example, so leave the resolution at 16-bit for now. Double-click on the Action node for its menus, and switch to the 2-up view with Alt-2. Action schematic on the left, and result viewport on the right. Delete the second image object, as you'll use this as a UV map on the logo. Scrubbing the time bar, this is just a flat 2D image. To apply UV mapping to the image object, select it in the Action schematic, and switch to the Action node bin. Select the UV map in the media list. Switch the Action node bin to Display Maps. Locate the UV map object and drag it into the Action schematic. This applies the UV map onto the logo object, and it's instantly distorted in the result view. When you scrub the time bar, you can see the rippling effect of the distortion. The main point to highlight in this simple example is that Action is applying the 32-bit float precision of the UV map onto the image. So looking very closely at the logo, there are no artifacts and the result is very clean. Now up to this point, we have only been working with 32-bit data that has been externally imported into Flame. This would be typical of CGI and various data parsers. However, Action does have the capabilities to run at 32-bit, as well as output its own 32-bit data parsers for a variety of creative and technical tasks. Let's take a look at the next example. To start, click on the Load button and choose to load and append a batch setup. Choose the batch setup that was provided with the downloadable materials. Double-click on this Action node and switch to a 2-up view. Scrubbing the time bar, you will see a stream of particles. The point is that we have some 3D geometry which has been textured, and the Action 3D environment contains a range of 3D data to access. Now, in order to keep a 32-bit pipeline, there are 2 requirements. Firstly, switch to the node preferences. Under rendering, you could use a 32-bit image as a background, and Action will automatically update. Or you can set the resolution to user defined and change the bit depth to 32-bit float point. Remember to press Apply to apply the changes. Now I need to make a very important point. The compositing environment is operating at 32-bit float, and you can use 32-bit data parsers with high precision. This will be indicated here, as well as the text under the node in Batch. However, when outputting from Action as a 32-bit result, you need to enable another preference to ensure that all actions outputs will be true 32-bit float. This is mandatory for all action outputs, as well as using 32-bit data with Matchbox camera effects. Switch to the batch preferences. Under the graphics rendering header, you will see the action precision option. This is normally off by default. The reason for this is that constantly processing at 32-bit float precision is extremely graphics intensive and requires powerful graphics hardware to perform interactivity. If your Linux or Mac-based hardware cannot sustain 32-bit processing, you are going to want this off. An alternative way to think about it is that it is entirely possible to work in 16-bit and only process at 32-bit when you're ready. This will maintain your system's interactivity, and then you can render at 32-bit when making your deliverables. I will reiterate that in order to process 32-bit outputs from action, the action node needs to be set to 32-bit, and the 32-bit graphics action precision must be enabled. Enable this button, and let's get back to our example. Now we'd like to use the 32-bit UVs generated by this 3D particle stream as a creative effect on our logo. So switch to the Action Output menu and scroll the render passes to the bottom. Select the UV pass to display it in the viewport and enable it as an output. Now going back to the batch schematic, you can take the 32-bit output from this action node and use them elsewhere in the flow graph. So let's use the UV outputs in another action node to create some pixel distortion effects. Drag out a second action node from the batch node bin. If you want to maintain the 32-bit pipeline in this action node, go to the node preferences and change its resolution to 32-bit. You can verify this on the node. Next, select the Waterworks logo and duplicate the source with Ctrl-D. Select the action node and press Ctrl-N twice to create two new media inputs. Connect the duplicated logo into Media Input 1 and the Action UV outputs into Media Input 2. Now double-click on the action node and switch to a 2-up view. As before, to apply this 32-bit UV pass to the logo, delete the image object and its axis. Select the logo image object. Switch to the action node bin and select the UV pass media input. Switch the action node bin to the Maps tab and drag out a UV map and it will attach to the logo's image object. As a tip, if your viewport still shows a UV output, go to the Outputs menu and scroll your render passes to the top. Selecting the viewport and switching to the Comp output will display the final output or beauty pass. When you scrub the time bar, you can see that the UV coordinates are remapping the logo texture, creating this effect. Now with the 32-bit float precision, you can manipulate the data pass without artifacts on the final render. For example, double-click on the UV map object for its controls. By increasing or decreasing the effect, you can decide how much or how little influence the UV map will have on the image. A big favorite of mine is if you increase the softness in both X and Y, you start getting this liquefy effect based on the 32-bit UV data. What's interesting is when you scrub the time bar, the liquid effect appears to blend very well with the logo. This is due to the 32-bit float processing enabled in the batch preferences. Zoom the viewport very tight into a section of the distortion, and switch to the batch preferences menu. Toggle the 32-bit graphics option on and off. You should see the difference when enabling the action output precision to 32-bit float. Now just to round off this example, let me show you how you could use 32-bit data passes as a means of versioning when compositing. Swipe back to batch. select the action node, and press Ctrl-N for a third media input. Grab the title clip and connect it into Media Input 3. Double-click the action node and go back to the 2-up view. You may need to fit the result back to the viewport. Next, double-click on the title image object for its controls. Go to the Image tab and change the blending mode to Multiply. So right now, the title is unaffected by the distortions. Hold Shift and kiss the title image object to the axis of the UV map to make a connection. The same UV data is being applied to the title. You could also use multiple UV maps on different image objects if you want. So in terms of versioning, you can use the 32-bit data on any input to update the composite. So in summary, with the introduction of 32-bit float support in the Flame 2018 products, you can work in and maintain a 32-bit float pipeline which will give you better processing precision when working with a variety of high-quality 32-bit media. Please remember to check the Flame documentation for the list of 32-bit capable tools in Flame 2018. Be sure to check out the other features, workflows, and updates to the Flame 2018 products. Comments, feedback, and suggestions are always welcome and appreciated. Thank you for watching, and please subscribe to the Flame Learning channel for future videos.